Serious cancer survivors of Reddit. When did you first notice something was wrong? I had uterine cancer. I was weak for a long time. But I had just had my son a few months before, so I thought it was just healing after a C-section. I was bleeding a lot. I remember calling my mom and asking her to pick me up some pads and her asking me why more. I just got some last week. That's when I told her I'd been bleeding for 3 months. She made me call my doctor who couldn't get me in for another 6 weeks. My mom did not agree with that at all. She called her gynecologist, told them what was going on, and they got me in that day. After numerous tests, blood work, a DNC, I was told I had endometriosis. After they did a DNC to clean the blood, they did an biopsy and found the cancer. The doctor was amazed that I was able to get pregnant and could not imagine how I carried my son full term. He was very pissed that the on-call doctor who did my C-section didn't catch anything. I remember after the biopsy came back, he came into the room and said very bluntly, "You have cancer. Now you have 2 options. We can treat it with chemo and radiation and hope for the best, or we can do a complete hysterectomy and get it all at once." I just looked at him and told him to cut that shit out of me. So 14 years later, cancer free, and I've been here to raise my kids. August 1st, 2015. I woke up and felt a strange pressure in my chest. The night before I had picked something up and I figured I just strained myself. Didn't think much of it until around November. I started getting itchy, like really itchy, mostly on my legs, but pretty much everywhere. I always struggled with having itchy skin after a hot shower, so at first I didn't pay it too much attention until it started getting annoying. I tried new shampoos and body wash, washed and changed my sheets, looked for bed bugs, lice, anything I could think of. Finally, on March 31st, 2016, a few weeks after my 21st birthday, I was just getting into bed when I coughed. Now, for context, I also suffer from frequent bloody noses, so I'm used to coughing and having a bloody nose. But this time when I coughed, I felt blood coming from down inside of me, rather than up from my nose. I immediately grabbed a cup and started coughing up blood into it, right next to my girlfriend in bed. I managed to tell her to call 911, and I threw myself into the bathroom, and there I was, holding onto the sink for dear life, coughing up more and more blood. I couldn't stop. Every time I tried to catch my breath I would feel a tickle and have to cough, sending more blood out. That bathroom looked like the elevator from The Shining by the end of it. Finally, 10 minutes goes by, and the ambulance arrives. I had basically made my peace with this world and was prepared to let go. But then the coughing finally subsided, and I could breathe again without coughing up blood. Took a ride to the ER. They kept me for a week, poking and prodding me, doing tests. I almost got sent home with a diagnosis of tuberculosis. But finally they confirmed it was cancer. Stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma to be exact. Sounds bad and scary, but out of all the types of cancers known, this one is fairly easy to cure and has a high success rate of not reoccurring. So, I did chemo for 6 months. That sucked. Finished in October 2016. I'm just about to go into my last post-treatment checkup tomorrow. And hopefully if everything is good I won't have to keep getting checkups every year. Interestingly, however, I always had a feeling in my mind that one day I would get cancer. I can't exactly describe why I thought this, but I did, and it turned out to be true. Everyone, go get yourself checked out. You do not want to wait too long and let things progress. Do what you can to have good health, because without it we are nothing. Also, my girlfriend was such a fucking trooper. She handled herself and the situation incredibly well for how scary that must have been for her. Lord knows I would be terrified if our roles reversed and she was the one in trouble. I only pray I can handle things as good as her. If you're reading this, I love you and I'm so proud you kept your cool. Edit. My brain did a thing and I got mixed up. I had Hodgkin's lymphoma, not non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, as I thought. My apologies. Update. My appointment went great. My doctor even said that my blood work is probably the best that she is going to see today. Which, I mean, is great for me. but I felt kind of sad for everyone else. You know? But yes, all good. The only thing that is high is my liver function. But that can be caused by the medications I take. It's all looking great. They did say that they do want to continue checkups for every 6 months. Apparently they do this for 5 years instead of 2, like I thought. Thank you everyone for your well wishes. I'm trying to get back to as many of you as I can. First bout with cancer was my brain tumor. I was having a business meeting with a contractor who was doing some graphic design work for my company. I'd had a few brain farts over the last couple of months, where I'd been trying to say a word, but just couldn't come up with it. I brushed them off as tip of my tongue type brain farts and ignored them. In this meeting I got stuck on the word an. I figured this is ridiculous and forced it, but what came out was AAHH, and I don't remember anything after that other than waking up in the hospital. Turns out I had an oligodendroglioma which had been pressing up against my speech center and had grown to the point where it was screwing with my ability to talk. It's incredibly rare, 4% of all brain tumors, and only found in men in their 40s. It's also almost never diagnosed until you have a seizure, which is what happened in the meeting. Apparently the contractor was traumatized as I fell out my chair and thrashed on the floor. Ambulances came, etc. I woke up on a gurney with the nerdoc calmly telling me that the CAT scan had found a golf ball sized lump in my brain that wasn't supposed to be there and that I should probably go see an oncologist about that. That was over a decade ago. Oligodendrogliomas respond well to resection, chemo and radiation treatment, and I've been fine ever since. The second bout was this year when a polyp found during a routine colonoscopy had cancerous material in it, and they decided to do a lower colon resection in an abundance of caution. Turns out one of the 20 plus lymph nodes they removed along with the bottom 10 feet of my colon had some cancer in it, so I spent about 12 weeks this summer on a much more intensive course of chemotherapy than my brain tumor. That was a nasty ride, but I should be fine now. Fuck cancer. Invasive malignant melanoma. Diagnosed and removed at 29. I noticed a dark mole on my upper arm/shoulder area that wasn't there before. Over the next year it doubled in size, but was still smaller than what they tell you to look for. I offhand asked my dermatologist to check it, and he says he would, but that it wouldn't be anything. It was. I was considered stage 2, although from what I hear stages are an outdated way of classifying melanoma. I'm okay now. Had a precancerous mole removed about a year after the cancer, but I get checked regularly. You know you best. If something seems off, be your own advocate and get it checked. Just over a year ago, I had been increasingly tired and fatigued over a period of 6 months. I had also been dealing with lower leg swelling, to the point that I could barely wear shoes. I had been out with my mom and was so out of breath I couldn't walk the 100 yards or so into a grocery store. I was admitted to the hospital with a hemoglobin of 4 and incredibly low thyroid levels. Fast forward a day or two, and I start with what can only be described, without being gross, as an incredibly irregular period. I was scheduled for a uterine biopsy a few weeks after discharge, and was found to have endometrial cancer. We attempted the conservative course of treatment as I'm only 32 and have not had kids yet. This was all fine and well until January when 2 masses were found in my uterine wall. Fast forward 2 months and an MRI shows that even on hormone suppression therapy, the masses were growing. I had a complete hysterectomy on March 29th of this year. One of the masses was 70% through the uterine wall. Luckily my lymph nodes were clear and I didn't need chemo or radiation. Felt like shit all the time. Fatigued constantly and losing my physical strength. Finally went to my family doctor who said it was just aging. Went for a second opinion and they found high cancer markers in my blood test. Spent the next few months going back and forth to various specialists while they tried to pinpoint it. Finally turned out to be both lymphatic and testicular cancer. I was very lucky. I lost 6 lymph nodes and a treacherous left testicle and came out of it clean after having to do very little treatment. But with what I went through and what I spent, I have a new respect for people who survive more severe forms of cancer. Fatigued constantly and losing my physical strength. Great. Now 90% of Reddit thinks they have cancer. Testicular cancer. 20 years old. For me it was rather obvious. Lots of pain in my abdomen, and one of the boys was about 4x the size of the other. That being said, usually it isn't that obvious. So guys, always remember to check your junk in the shower. I had an inguinal orchiectomy, and I'm currently going through chemo. I'm going to chemo tomorrow. Already got chemo, then radiotherapy, then surgery for an esophageal cancer, so it's my second chemo round. I'm tired by all this shit, but the end is near for me. Hope you too. I was studying in grad school, looking down and reading frequently when I began to feel vague neck discomfort. I ignored it for a few weeks, but told my then girlfriend. Then I noticed an asymmetrical bulge in my neck. I wanted to blow it off until our year-long finals were over, but my girlfriend insisted I get checked out. It was thyroid cancer. I went through 2 surgeries and radiation therapy, but fortunately I've been cancer-free for 5 years now. Don't ignore your body when something feels off. And don't try to treat yourself when it comes to medicine. For me it started with my eyes in my late 30s. Felt perfectly fine otherwise, but my eyes would have these weird all over flashes. Kind of like what you see after you stare too long at the sun. Especially when I was moving from dark to light places, like waking up in the morning, or turning on a light in a dark room at night. Got my eyes checked. Doc said my retinas had some severe high pressure areas, and it might be the start of macular degeneration. I got some new glasses, and went on with life figuring this was just going to be my new normal. Thank fucking god I had a routine yearly doctor's exam scheduled about 2 months after that. I felt 100% fine other than this weird eye thing. But the routine blood work came back so bad my doctor actually threw the first results away, saying it had to be a lab error. Second results came back even worse, and they sent me to a cancer specialist. Rare type of bone marrow cancer. They caught it early, and it's highly treatable with a 95% chance of living a relatively normal life afterward. But if they hadn't, I'd have been in critical condition. Maybe dead within a couple of years. Turns out my system was so overloaded with cancerous white blood cells that my blood was thick like potato soup. It was blowing out the veins in my eyes, which resulted in those flashes. They went away after about the first 2 weeks of treatment. Go to your doctor regularly. Was 100% symptom free except for weird white flashes in my eyes. Luckily for me, a yearly physical exam caught and diagnosed it a few months later when my blood work came back all messed up. Leukemia. 2. 5 years later, I'm close to remission and feeling mostly fine. If it hadn't been caught though, there's a decent chance I'd be dead today. Lots of people here saying they can't afford to see a doctor. I get it. Healthcare is a bitch in the US. But physical examinations without any health insurance typically cost only around $150 to $200. At least try to have one every 2 years. If you can't do it yearly, it may sound like a lot, but ignoring your health costs way more in the end. The difference between catching something early today versus catching it too late tomorrow can literally be life and death. I wish I had a better answer. I was pregnant for the first time, 1999, and my gut was relentless, telling me something wasn't right. I didn't feel right. I brushed a lot of it off as pregnancy hormones, but something just wasn't right. It caused sleep loss and anxiety. I went to her at 9 weeks and was told I had a UT. Now as a midwifery student my bacterial load was low enough that I know I didn't have a UT. Back around 5 weeks. Again to my doctor at 12 and 14. I'd had a scan at 5 weeks and it was normal. Finally at 18 weeks I went into her again because I couldn't shake this feeling of impending doom. I got a resident for the first time and she just said that sometimes first time moms need to see their babies to shake worries. She sent me for an anatomy scan. Dead baby. Massive snowstorm tissue. It was a molar pregnancy. Placenta was massive and riddled with mutations. I was scheduled for a D&C. My follow-up a month later was 5 minutes with an OB who told me it wasn't like the baby was term. I could have more babies. I should wait a year. Within days the sense of dread crept back. 3 months later I joined an online support group for women who had molar pregnancies and found out I should have had twice weekly blood work and follow-up scans. to make sure there was no retained placenta tissue. By then the stuff mist in DC had taken over and metastasized. I'm lucky I found those women. They saved my life, and my GP filed a formal complaint against the incompetent OB that we trusted to do my care. TL. Doctor, impending sense of doom is a legit medical symptom. Ewing's sarcoma. Diagnosed at age 12. The first time I remember noticing it was during a volleyball game. I spiked and landed and felt a sharp pain in my left thigh. I ignored it and it would bother me on and off for a few months. I was trying not to let my parents worry because my older sister has CF and was going through a rough patch. I was limping most of the time, but occasionally it wouldn't hurt at all. One day I was walking downstairs at school and as I took a step I was blinded by pain, screamed and collapsed. By the time my mom got to school to pick me up it was barely a lake, but she said we should get X-rays just in case. This was around 5 months after the volleyball pain. And cancer. I started treatment immediately. 13 months of chemo, 100 nights in hospital, 2 years of physical therapy to lose my limp. Wow. My mother had Ewing's sarcoma. Diagnosed at 17 in 1978. She had it in her ribs and noticed it when she couldn't sit in her desk at school. She ended up going to St. Jude's about once a month for a week at a time and had surgery to remove 2 of her ribs on her back right side, replaced with mesh that grows over time. She also endured chemo. I just want to let you know that she is 58, a 40-year cancer survivor. She goes to St. Jude's every 4 years for survivor research and testing. Hope all is well with you. Probably when my stomach was starting to hurt extremely fucking bad. I had lymphoma at the age of 10, and I was taken to the emergency room after I was vomiting blood because there was nothing else in my stomach. The day before, the nurse sent me home from school because of my extreme stomach pains. Luckily we caught it very early, so it wasn't too bad. But it sure as hell wasn't fun. Though oddly enough, even though I had cancer, I never once thought about myself dying in the hospital. Maybe because I was so young. But I just simply enjoyed my time by playing on those bucks they had in there and the gifts I was given. I also watched Jumanji maybe 20 times over. I didn't know there was anything wrong. No symptoms. I was diagnosed with cervical cancer through routine screening. I had missed one due to being out of the country. Luckily it was spotted early enough that I got away with just having a total hysterectomy, cervix, uterus and tubes removed. I've been left with the lingering fear that they missed a bit somewhere and it'll reoccur, and a messed up bowel/GI situation, but at least my ovaries are still working and I'm not dead. Ladies, get your regular checkups. A smear test is far less uncomfortable or embarrassing than having the world and its wife all up in your nethers trying to rid you of cancer. Randomly ended up so sick I was bedbound for a month. Got every test for the flu/cold/viruses they could think of. Ended up getting an ultrasound on my stomach. They saw a mass while doing so and also scanned my pelvic area. Turned out to be ovarian cancer, but luckily for me, it was contained in the football-sized tumor attached to my right ovary, which I obviously didn't know was there. Month later I was cut open, had it removed. -1 ovary in the constant fear it'll come back later, and I'm cancer free. For now. I'm hoping this isn't insensitive or rude. A football-sized tumor. I'm curious if they told you how much it weighed, or if you noticed an appreciable weight loss after removal. Thank you for sharing your story. You'd be amazed how much your internal organs can shift around to accommodate a tumor. My friend, on the thin side, had a non-cancerous ovarian cyst the size of a softball removed. She didn't look any different. She just thought she was a little bloated. All leukemia. Diagnosed age 18. Was working at a construction supply yard at the time and was having to call out sick all the time. Mind you, I was no stranger to hard work, and I was usually the kind of person who went to the doctor maybe once a year for the flu/cold. I started dropping weight and thought that it must just be from the job. The thing that began to concern me was the lack of muscle that I was building in place and how weak I felt all the time. Got laid off because I had just been hired on for summer help, but kept getting seemingly worse. Dad decided to have some blood work run. and the lab tech realized I was grossly anemic and had a huge amount of white blood cells. I was in the hospital and diagnosed within 72 hours. Brain tumor, diagnosed at 22. But I was asymptomatic. I had no headaches, no blurred vision, no change in personality, just weight gain. Had I not been a vain bugger and wanting a quick pill to sort it out, I would never have gone to the doc and had a blood test. My bloods came back all highly irregular. Fast forward 6 months of tests. Brain tumor. From your post, you seem to have a practical view of what most of us would be hysterical about. I hope you have been cured or your cancer is in remission. Best of luck to you, and I think you are wrong about being a vain bugger because of the simple statement you made above. Thanks. For some reason it never really shook me. Everyone around me fell apart, but I've always been the sort to go okay. So it's cancer, what do we do now? And go with whatever was needed. Just to fill you in, I had unsuccessful brain surgery, drug and radiotherapy, and it stopped growing. I'm now 36. Have annual MRI scans. Every 6 months I have a checkup. My bloods and hormones are checked. And I'm a walking medicine cabinet. All I can say is, I'm glad I'm in the UK. One of my meds will cost me £1. $1 284 ago, and it only lasts 5 days. Mid-Oct 2017. I went to my PCP several times over a 6-month period about my symptoms. Trouble breathing, dizzy, throwing up after doing any kind of physical activity, even just walking to the bathroom. PCP did lab work a few times and said my RBCs were a little low and we'd keep an eye on them. She basically just ignored what I was telling her and did so for months. Then in May 2018 I go in for an ACT and a fasting blood test. PCP takes one look at me and calls an ambulance to take me to the ER because I was super pale and my RBCs were really low. I ended up being admitted to the hospital and get 4 blood transfusions. BC my RBC was like 2.9 and my ACT was something else unbelievably low. People kept asking me how I was still standing. Felt like a new person. A week or so later I go back to my PCP who insists whatever was wrong with me was parvo and that I'm too young for cancer. I'm 35. The next day I go to a different hospital and get a bone marrow biopsy. The doctors there mention that I was already severely anemic in November and something should have been done then. The day after that my husband and I get phone calls telling me to get to the hospital immediately. That I have cancer. I was diagnosed with FLT3 mutated acute myeloid leukemia, AML, and spent the next 2 months getting chemo, another week of HIDAC chemo, and then had a bone marrow transplant in September. Later found out what started in Oct was likely a pre-cancer, MDS, and had it been caught before developing into AML, it could have been easier to take care of. My oncologist also said that if I had had AML back when the symptoms started I would have been dead by May. I also wouldn't have lasted much longer had the AML not been diagnosed. Doing well so far, but that bitch PCP cost me months and ignored everything for so long that I nearly died. As of tests from last week I have 100% donor in the myeloid lineage, with 95% donor in the lymphocyte lineage. I'm not sure what the difference between the myeloid and lymphocyte lineage are, but my oncologist is very happy with how my engraftment and recovery have been going. The month after transplant was rough. I was scratching my balls and felt a hard knot. Froze for like 10 seconds, panicking internally, thinking it's definitely cancer, then remembered that cancer is actually pretty rare and it's far more likely to just be a cyst or something. Went to the doctor anyway because I'm not an idiot. It was cancer. Edit to answer some questions since I can't get to everyone individually. Also please feel free to PM me if you have further questions, need advice or just want to talk about it. I did not get to keep the ball. They have to look at it under a microscope to determine the specific type of cancer and for that they usually slice it up a bit so there wouldn't have been much to keep anyway. The knot was rock hard and attached to the testicle. Inside the sac and maybe a tiny bit more sensitive than the testicle normally is. Otherwise completely painless, but your mileage may vary. In some cases the tumor will start growing inside the testicle causing it to swell. In others the testicle might even shrink. If it's soft and squishy it's probably not cancer, but still have it checked if you're worried. A simple ultrasound can determine if it's a solid tumor and requires further attention. If it comes and goes it's also most likely not cancer. Cancer will generally only get bigger without treatment. They do offer you a prosthetic replacement. Although I refused because I heard it can be uncomfortable in some situations and I don't notice a difference anyway. You can still have sex with one ball. The remaining testicle takes up the workload of the removed one. I'm not infertile and don't have testosterone problems, but that can happen in some cases. I was 21 when first diagnosed and 22 when I relapsed. Treatment didn't cost me anything because I live in a country with universal healthcare. Checking regularly is good, but don't overdo it. Generally once a month is enough. Testicular cancer is rare as it accounts for roughly 0.51% of male cancers.